It is a great honour for me to be having an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in Dublin. I'm very sorry I can't be there with you all, but the virus won't let me. I hope to be there soon in Ireland, a country I love.
As part of Culture Night 2020, IMMA is delighted to open Paula Rego, Obedience and Defiance, which is a major exhibition of this artist's work, of her paintings, of her drawings and prints, spanning over a 50-year period. Many of the works on view have not been seen before. They've been lent by the artist's family and friends. It's an exhibition that is curated by Catherine Lambert, and she's travelled to Milton Keynes Gallery, which originated it, and from there then to the National Gallery of Scotland. So we're absolutely thrilled to be showing this work here at IMMA. She's such an important figure. She's in her late 80s now. There's so many topics and themes that are of interest to her and her feminist view on the world that are so relevant today. The themes which the exhibition addresses, I suppose, taking the title Obedience and Defiance, is particularly looking at the plight of women, but not just women, of humanity in general, and the terrible injustices that exist in the world today, between poverty, grief, gender discrimination, political injustice, all of these things which are so informing all of our lives, and the fragmented and uncertain world in which we live. But she brings humour and storytelling. She uses elements of autobiography very strongly, which she mixes with mythological stories, other earlier art history, and of course contemporary events. Paula Rego was born in Portugal in 1935. As a young woman, she moved to London to finish her schooling, and then she went to the Slade Art School, where she worked with Michael Andrews and Frank Auerbach and Leon Kossoff and others. So she was, I suppose, regarded in a way as part of that group that we now know as the London Group, or School of London. And she met her husband-to-be, Victor Willing, who was also a student at the Slade. And they married in the 60s. They had 3 children. Tragically, her husband developed multiple sclerosis when he was very young, in the mid-60s. They moved back to live in London full-time from the early 1970s. Much of her work is to do with the conflicting, I suppose, feelings and complexities of feelings that one has as a woman in the world, in her own particular environment because of the condition of her poor husband and his deterioration, and her need to want to care for him, but also, that real feeling, I suppose, of being hard done by and trying to love him, but to overcome, feelings of frustration. Also, of course, looking at the sort of patriarchal system that she'd come out of Portugal, but of course it's prevalent as well in many other parts of the world, and indeed in Ireland, so recently really, where women in particular had really deal with the prejudices and the patriarchal systems that are heaped upon them by, within the family, by the church and state. So a lot of her work is informed by those kind of antipathies, but she deals with them in ways through stories and through creating stories, and many times using animals to illustrate, because she feels that through using animals you can say things and do things that you perhaps can't, with human sitters. So we're here in IMMA mid-installation. It's really great always to have an opportunity to look behind the scenes, I think, because works look so amazing up close when they're standing up blocks, as they always are. We've done the condition checking. We're waiting to connect the Rymans onto the hooks, and eventually we'll get them up on the walls. And then they look different again. We have other pieces as well, which will join this one here. So we still have a bit of laying out to do, but it's just, it's that moment when everything started to come together. And when you can get up close and really look at the work. Because funny enough, when it goes on the wall, it sort of becomes a more formal thing, part of the room almost, of the architecture. But when you see it standing like this, it's like it's in your own studio, where you could really get up close and you can imagine how how she would have worked on it. And this is in fact a painting, but it will be one of her last paintings from 1990, but she was moving more and more towards using pastel. And you can see the images there, the face of the sitter, Joseph, and also the outline drawing of Mary, Virgin Mary, and with sketches and drawings for the angel and Mary and so on here. So it's a real inversion of the title is Joseph's Dream, and it's very much an inversion of that theme, because here we have Virgin Mary, who's the artist, and Joseph is the sitter. And so she's sitting in a very male pose, addressing the canvas. And it's, as I say, reversing the usual role play, because usually the male is the creator, the maker, and dictating everything in the studio, and the woman is the muse and the sort of more passive figure. But here, Mary is in control. And this is an amazing work. It's one of a series of pieces that the artist made as a retelling or a reworking of a 19th century novel called The Story of Father Amaro. And the title of this piece is Angel, and she is the avenging angel, so to speak. In the hands of this figure, this woman, very powerful woman, are Christian symbols of the sword and the sponge. And they refer to, of course, the crucifixion when Christ was offered vinegar to drink to quench his thirst, and the sword as an emblem of an avenging angel. And it's a piece that her work is very influenced by art historical work as well, much earlier centuries. So perhaps the Spanish artist Velázquez, or a bit later, perhaps Goya. All these are wonderful references for this artist out of the tradition from which she's come. Paula Rego, Obedience and Defiance runs until the 3rd of January, so we hope we can welcome as many of you as possible to visit this show. She is such an outstanding artist and one of the great figurative painters of our time.
Anthony Spira, who's director of Milton Keynes Gallery, asked me 5 years ago, I'm Catherine Lambert, if we worked together at Whitechapel, if I had an idea for an exhibition of a major figure, 20th century, it would be a lone exhibition, which would be the first one-person show after Milton Keynes' expansion happened, and they had an opening mixed exhibition. And I knew Paula Rego as a friend to some extent, because we had friends in common and we used to hang out together a bit in the 80s and 90s. But I'd never worked with her, so it's that privilege of curator. Well, the way I'd really get to know her work would be to form an exhibition, but that was just as a side reason. Obviously, I thought that her work was great quality and that it, the pictures have real presence, particularly these large pictures from the 1990s. She began in her 50s. And I had seen an exhibition in her museum in Cascais, which is outside Lisbon. It's called the House of Stories, Casa de Stories, which had an exhibition of her early 1960s work, which had been done under the Salazar regime and was very political. And I thought, well, it's funny, her political themes, she's known often for her storytelling, her interpretation of nursery rhymes, and Disney film Fantasia, Jane Eyre, all sorts of things like that. But I thought, when I saw this exhibition from the 1960s, which we have the works here, the first 2 rooms, I thought, wow, this artist is, she has an instinct for political, not in didactic, verbal way, but just for what happens under an oppressive regime, especially in this case in collaboration with the Catholic Church. So Salazar's fascist regime, the Catholic Church were together, and what it means for social and moral behavior. So her father had been a very strong Republican, so his grandfather, and really suffered under the idea of censorship of speech, expectations for women. He was one who insisted that his intelligent, his only child, his intelligent daughter, should, because it was Anglophile, and should go to England because she had a better chance of doing whatever she wanted to, which is pretty clear she was going to be an artist. If she had that, respect for what women can do professionally, as opposed to, you'll see from the picture of marriage a la mode, the idea of an arranged marriage and some codes of behavior for women. So seeing that exhibition and then beginning to reflect on Paula's, some of her subjects, they just seemed incredibly timely. So, there were, the only time she ever did a series of works, or the first time she did, I could say, in response to an event, was when she did the abortion, which was after, in Portugal, they had a referendum in June 1998, and it had a very low turnout, and it didn't change liberalizing the law, very harsh law, abortion. And she had also had a real experience, although her parents were, upper middle class and comfortable. She spent a lot of time in the countryside in Portugal and on the coast with her grandparents, and the experiences of seeing the real poverty in Portugal in the 50s, 60s, 40s, which was a young person. She was born in 1935. It really hit her that fisherwomen's wives coming to the door and begging for money because they already had some 8 children and they couldn't imagine having another child, feeding the child. Some artists were interested in political subjects, were very clear about, these are the victims, or these are the perpetrators, or this is the unfairness of the role of women, or whatever. And Paul was never like that. There's always that sense that one of the reasons for making the subtitle Obedience and Defiance was because she's always, it's a little bit much more ambiguous, that there's always a bit of frisson on sexual matters or attraction between men and women. It's never black and white for Paula. And she emphasizes in her work, you can see it, that she doesn't really know what's going to happen in the picture until she's doing it. She's made preparatory drawings to work out, the poses or spatial part of the composition. But really, it's when she's working, and particularly when she started working in 1994 in pastel drawing paintings, that she sort of, she goes into she calls it like going into a tunnel, and she doesn't know what's going to happen when she emerges, because it's going to be a picture unlike what she imagined at the beginning. So these are not didactic pictures in any kind of obvious sense.